Claire, I'm in New York. This morning it's snowy here, so you have to sort of try and get out and go for a walk. So this morning, a friend of mine, same age as I am, just a guy in his 60s. We're crusty, we're old, and I mentioned that I was doing this event, and he said, "Oh my God, that book!" And he's not Irish, and he had read your book and was overwhelmed by it, as I was. And we both agreed that it's a book you would give to your son, to your nephew, to anyone, any guy who's thinking of reaching the age of reason. He says, "Is there one book you could recommend for me?" I said, "Yeah, there absolutely is. It's this book." So that's just gendering the whole question, really. That this is a book I think that maybe women would enjoy, but I think men would not only benefit from, but need badly. And I want to start with the technical question, which is, it's very hard, I think anyone writing knows, to address a book to a direct person, to say in the narrative, this book is for you, and mention the you regularly. If you get it wrong, it's just so jarring. And then to try and call the other person, the person you're addressing the book to, sailor. And I found this so touching. I found you never got it wrong once. Every time you did it, you introduced a sort of sense of tenderness, a sense of almost introducing an element of the mythological. This is someone setting out. This is someone voyaging out. And your job is to see if you could write anything that would let this young person know what it was like in the time before he can remember. And I wondered, I suppose the question then is, at what point did the word sailor, just that word, come into your head?
Oh, it was always you, but it was actually addressed to darling for a long time. Um, when you have a child, even from a baby, you end up talking to them all the time. You know they don't understand you. That doesn't matter. It's the talking is important. I even remember my cousin saying that she because you're always talking to your infant, that she forgot she didn't have her child with her and was going, "Oh, isn't that a lovely apple in the supermarket?" before realizing I'm on my own here, shut up. So Sailor, the name came quite late in the novel because the book was originally called Darling and another novel called Darling was published. So I had to change that title, and Sailor seemed like the right name for this child. Um, and I know Sailor came, and I don't know when Soldier came. I know this novel didn't have a title for a long time, but I actually can't tell you when Soldier came. But it was more this motherhood is talking to someone who may or may not understand you. They will someday understand you. So it was always addressed to you. It's actually the the germ of the novel came from when I was in maternity hospital. I got a gift from my best friend who published her debut novel last year, Aoife Fitzpatrick, and she gave me this thing called a line a day diary. I can actually, where is it? It's I'm on to my third one now. It's a line a day, and you literally just fill in. And you can see we've only done 1 year. You just write one line of what happened that day, and this thing ended up being addressed to my child. So it's written, you, today we did this, you did that, you usually nothing much happens, but I would write out something that you did with the notion that one day he will get these. And as I say, this is a 5-year diary, and this one's empty because he's 11. So 1 to 5, 0 to 5, and 5 to 10 are complete, and they're up there somewhere. So this dialogue on top, this written dialogue on top of the spoken experience of being a mother and child unit, defined how the novel arose. It could not be other than addressed to an infant to whom you were close.
Yes, I suppose what I really admired was that it was the word, where you placed the word. But just to go back, Lucy Caldwell invokes or mentions Sylvia Plath in her blurb for your book. Sebastian Barry mentions Evan Boland, who were both poets. And I think the Sylvia Plath is the Sylvia Plath of those early, beautiful poems about having children about Nick and the Candlestick, that they're not the darker later poems, but the poems about motherhood that Ivan Boland also loved. They're poems. So they're snatching or catching a moment, and they're describing, for example, Ivan Boland in Night Feed, or even in later poems where she's describing her daughters as they're growing up. That Ivan talked about this idea that this is new. That there's nothing to work from. You're starting from scratch, and that was why she admired those Plath poems about motherhood. I'm sort of asking, because I'm not aware of another book like this. So I'm asking, as you were beginning to work, was there anything at all that you could find in literature, or indeed in memoir, or indeed in journalism, that you could say someone else has done something that I might try myself? But my feeling was that isn't what happened.
No. And the very first thing I wrote was nonfiction. It was a short essay in Winter Papers for Kevin Barry and Olivia Smith, in which it was written in 2015. And the thing, I think a lot of lady novelists, when they have a baby, turn to nonfiction for the next one. And it's to do with the imagination and how it works, or in my case, didn't work. And after having my son, my imagination seemed to be hobbled. I wasn't imagining anymore. It was very hard I've written about how hard I found it to finish a sentence, but to actually try and imagine characters was beyond me. So in that essay, I wrote about my child was 2.25 when I had an idea for a novel. And I didn't use the idea, but the thing was my imagination had started again. And of all people, I went back to Yeats. And I wrote about that in this essay.
W.B. Yeats.
Yeats. And it's funny, I went back to Yeats
that
again.
well-known mother.
But that well-known. And it was The Circus Animals' Desertion, which is about writer's block and about having nothing. You've nothing left. They have deserted you. Who am I? I'm nothing anymore. And now I must lie down where all the ladders start, in the foul rag and bone shop of my heart. And I lay down in the foul rag and bone shop of my heart, and all I had was this female voice talking to an infant, because that's really all I was. That's all my imagination could give to me. And he couldn't talk back yet, because he had, little kids can't speak yet. They could scream, but they have no dialogue. So that was the start of it. It could not but be that way for me. I didn't want to write it even. I wanted to go back to one of my old novels. I wrote about art, I wrote about violins, I wrote about books, I wrote about the Celtic tiger and Crash. I wanted to be that person, but that person was gone. And in the foul rag and bone shop of my heart was this person, and this is what I wrote. That person.
So, I mean, but just to go back to the question, was there any other book that you thought somebody in fiction had tried this? I mean, in other words, what struck me about the book, which is one of the overwhelming things about the book, really, is I haven't read this before. And, with most books, you feel you've read the marriage plot, you've read crime, you've read the murder story. But with this, I feel that this is territory that has not been explored. And perhaps you've offered an explanation for that in the immediate aftermath, or the decade after having a first child, there may be a resistance to writing about it, to writing fiction about it, or even to writing at all.
The answer is no. I hadn't read a book, and that captured my experience anyway. And I largely experienced the world through novels and through the novel forum, which I think was why I was so unprepared for motherhood, because anything I had seen was kids were funny, everything was okay. They were minor characters. They were not the main event. So no, I hadn't seen anything that reflected my very intense experience of it.
It strikes me as interesting that some of the early great feminist writers whose books have a sort of biblical quality, such as Germaine Greer or Simone de Beauvoir, that they didn't actually write about motherhood, that they didn't have children, that they didn't write directly from their own experience as mothers. And I think that might be significant.
But it's a very strange. This novel is almost like a stoner novel because the narrator doesn't. She forgets and messes everything up, and she's not quite together. And that is my experience of being a mother: is you forget everything because your child changes slightly every day. So it's very hard to depict something that's changing all the time. And I think, but for these little diaries, I would have forgotten an awful lot of those early days. And it's very hard to depict something that's erased itself. And anyone who has a child will tell you this. You sort of forget last week's version because it's the child overwrites itself over and over with every development, and your relationship is changing and it's great, but you forget what was there before. And I think just the fact that I've written these sentences every day, I had a record of what we were doing, what was going on, if like his first word, that sort of thing. So that enabled me to have a grasp on doing this. Whereas it's unusual to have any kind of written record. And I think that's possibly contributes to why there isn't that much, certainly in the novel form. There is nonfiction and interesting nonfiction and helpful nonfiction, but the novel, and then there are some great novels. The one I connected with most was Sarah Moss's Night Waking. And it's a mother trying to keep it together with two kids. And it's the same thing of like, what will I feed them? And the younger child in this novel wakes her mother every night at 4 a.m. to say, Mummy, say a gruffalo. Mummy, sing a gruffalo. Mummy, sing a gruffalo. And it becomes this sort of torture. And the child's brilliant, the child's lovely, but to have this constant Mummy, sing a gruffalo is hellish on one level, despite the love, so I found that's the novel I connected with most and saw my own experience reflected in. But there wasn't much of the young kids, the preschoolers. I think once kids start speaking, now you can turn them into a character. But when they can't speak,
I suppose that one of the things that we do as novelists is we get something small and try and make it big. In other words, that some tiny detail in a novel can end up standing for a lot. I think this is quite useful for you here, where, for example, there's a moment where, there's a whole business of the buggy, which can just fall over. Now, if it falls over, the things that are hanging on it, such as the nappies, such as the groceries, are also going to fall. And what's also going to happen then is the wider world, the sort of arena, is going to judge you. Going to say, look at that mother, she can't even do the following things. So that the level of problems from a single object, which is tiny, which can be folded into nothing, really becomes enormous. It isn't that it's symbolic. It is what I was saying earlier, the element of it moving with the word sailor into some form of mythology, that you're voyaging out and the tools you have are the buggy, the nappy, the feeding, whatever feeding thing is happening. And this is always going to fall over.
Yeah.
Chaos. I mean, chaos is going to result, and judgmentalness. People are going to judge you all the time.
You're going to.
No, sorry. When I say you, I mean the.
Oh no, sure, but
the character in the book. Sorry.
There's such an element of slapstick to parenting. I know what you mean about the object, and I think that's particularly we Irish writers. Joyce. It was such a big thing in Dubliners that was it the corkscrew got lost in one story and got found in another, and this idea of an object sort of pinning together a plot. And it can reappear and be different. So, yes, I love an object that repeats throughout a text. I'm trying to think. There is an object that does, and I can't think of it right now, but it's not the buggy. The I've tried to depict the humiliation of being the person with the slapstick buggy, but my actual retrospectively, you're not being judged. That was one of the takeaways I took from being a mother, is actually people are helpful. When they see you and your stuff falling over, people start picking it up and, you know, being nice to you. And now I find myself, and I would never have been clued into this before having a child, I find myself helping. If I see a kid and it's, the child's going to run here and the other child's going to run, that you help now, So actually you feel judged at the time, but you're not. But I wanted to write soldiers' humiliation, because it is, you go from being independent and competent to incompetent and dependent and not free. So all of that had to be there, and the buggy and the car seat, the child's car seat, and all the harnesses. They're another thing that is designed to torment people. But yeah, the objects in novels they carry an electricity. They're very interesting, and I'm trying to find the object. I think a key is the object in the next novel. There's always a way. It's funny what a novel is and how it works in this code, but it does.
I suppose a novel is also a set of small decisions and big decisions. And I just want to ask you about a few of the big decisions. You obviously made a big decision not to do flashback. That it would be so easy to say chapter 2 is going to be how they met, how the pair, how the mother and the father, the husband, actually met each other. What that was like, their courtship, where they went, all the things they said, their college life, and in a way, also the sort of levels of training, what exactly the mother did before she had a baby, where she worked, what she studied. Now, a decision was made by you that all of that was to go, that you were to live in real time. This novel was to occur in the real time of the baby, the motherhood, and almost it was to be enclosed, was to be circled, and nothing else much, certainly from the past, was to be let in.
Yes, it was. It's not like I wanted it to be claustrophobic, but that was the experience, is quite claustrophobic. It's just you and your child, and you can't escape into the past.
I wasn't talking about claustrophobia as much as the intensity you get.
Well, intensity is a nicer word for it. So
yeah.
I knew that there had to be one day in the life chapter, and it's chapter 2. And I had to write boredom. If I was to write an honest novel, the challenge was to write excruciating boredom and to try and make it not excruciatingly boring to read. So chapter 2 is just getting through a day with I think Sailor he's crawling by then. He's about 9 months old. And the days, technically it's 20, the day is about 14 hours, but it seems in the narrator's head to go on for 24 hours, and she's exhausted. So things like that. And I knew this is really bad. You're writing a novel about boredom and then panic and then back to boredom and panic, and it's not novelistic, and yet it's the experience. So they're like motherhood, there could be no escape from it. The only escape was your child grows up. So, and this is to make motherhood sound very dark. It's the most rewarding thing there can be, but I would like to also acknowledge that you veer from, certainly in the preschool years, from boredom to panic, back to boredom to panic. So it was more about just trying to write how it feels. It's a feely novel. Everything about this novel is just the feelings.
I was aware all the time, I think, of how little sleep the mother was getting, even though she doesn't go on about it. But I was aware, I don't think she's sleeping. Forget the baby, but there was a sense of her not remembering things, strung out on things. I realized, oh my God, she's been awake. She's been awake.
It's also that she can't think. It's you don't it's very hard to think when you're with a baby, because of the kind of constant demands. It's a state of constant interruption. How the brain works, like, I'm not going to give you a lecture on how the brain works. There was something on REM sleep as I was moving around the house today, but there is, to kind of make yourself into a human being who can remember stuff and have cogent thought processes, you need a bit of alone time, so if you do not have an hour or two alone, well, certainly this brain, if you do not have that time to recalibrate and just put things in order, line them up in your own head, then things get frittered and mistakes get made, and tempers are frayed, and it's difficult. So I learned a lot about what my human mind needs. This diary that I showed you, I always, until I became a mother, kept diaries of my own in which I wrote nothing, like I didn't sleep very well. The stuff that is you put in your own diary, and that is self-building, if you know what I mean. You're kind of laying down in words to yourself who you are and where you're at and how you're getting on. And when all of that is interrupted, everything is interrupted, and you wonder who you are because you're not inventing yourself anymore, or you're not setting yourself down, therefore you wash away. It's very strange, and that's what I was trying to write, the loss of that self.
I'm just wondering if you're saying here, and I think it's in the book, that it isn't a simple matter of, she's not getting enough sleep, that's a very male way of trying to look at the problem, as though there's a direct cause for this problem. But I think what you're saying in the book, and what you're saying is, don't narrow it down to causes that are nameable, that this is an actual much more, I suppose, amorphous and serious matter, because it's really about the entire body of the mother being taken over after the birth by the child in some way that, say, an outsider being someone who has not had the experience, such as me, will not get unless you read the novel.
Soldier says I'm sleep deprived and think deprived to describe this loss of self. But yeah, it baffles me that I had so little reality before becoming a mother of what this would involve, and things began to seem very patronizing. Like, when you're trying to dismiss something, you say, it's just teething troubles. And then and it sounds like such a small thing, your child's teething, but when your child is teething, like, it's so...
Yeah, you make that particular night a sort of dark night of the soul.
There are many dark nights.
No matter
of the
what
soul.
you say about it, it isn't teething. It's the most awful business, because and the phoning of the doctor in the middle of the night, and the walking, and the having sort of strange dreams as you walk through the city.
Yeah.
I come back to the idea that you've moved to this experience out of the language of teething, or the language where you can easily bring it, just dismiss it or make it ordinary, into some heightened experience that is, I suppose, we might call, memorable experience for the reader. In other words, as you're pushing the buggy through the night, it moves out of reality into unreality, and the reader's with you. And you've created that by establishing that it begins somewhere in the baby's mouth, with perhaps what we call a small thing, and moves out of that into something much larger, I suppose much grander than that.
It's so intimate to bring a life, giving birth is intimate, but to be with a little human being as they are formed, it's so intimate and strange that the writing had to become intimate and strange to evoke the privilege that it is to see. I don't know how my son will turn out, but I know who he was, and but nobody else will know who he was like I knew who he was because I was there. And I wanted to evoke that intimacy. So, and most people who have had children will have walked during the night when everyone else around them is asleep and it's just you and your child. And it was like, I remember that the stuff didn't happen, and yet it did, if you know what I mean. I have walked at night by the sea with the famous buggy and my child in it, and you wander, your mind wanders, because a lot of being a mother is indoors and heated and domestic and interior. So when you escape into the night sky, it's very liberating and strange, and you're seeing your child develop. So yeah, the pros dictated how that would turn out. I don't like to uh make things over complex, but the experiences that I had dictated how this should be. It told me, if you know what I mean, how this book needed to be.
And the novel, I suppose, is three different love stories. It's the love story of the mother to the child. It's the love story of the mother and her husband, which is a much more complex one, obviously. And the love story then that begins in a park. And it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, there's so many things you could have done. You could have her bonding with another mother. You
Yes.
could have her, but when she turns up that first day and sees him, I think she's at her lowest. I mean, the sense of her, there's a description of her hair, of her feeling about herself. And she suddenly comes into the park and sees this guy. Again, we don't get much backstory, but they knew each other. And
Yes.
there's a lovely word, the word weapon, being used about a former girlfriend
Right.
that he had in college, which was that weapon he was with, which is, they're lovely. There's so many lovely touches like that. But I suppose I want to ask you, you obviously felt at a certain point something has to happen in this novel other than that the baby
Yes.
will just get a bit older, that you need one thing to occur. What's beautiful about it is how restrained it is, and how much, I suppose, the word is not love as much as easy affection, a sort of gentleness, sort of that association becomes, rather than dramatic, gentle. And that way of being gentle is itself more dramatic than the easy drama, say, if they had some sort of sexual relations or something like that.
It was yes, I did actually, as a novelist, realize you need to introduce someone else here. But the point that this is the friend character, a friend enters, an old friend from soldiers past, she bumps into him, and
Who
yes,
has who has three children
he has three
and,
kids, and he's
is fathering in the way that she's mothering.
he's way better at it. He's way
I
better.
don't know. I mean, there's a fight between the kids, and he says, "Sort it out yourselves. I'm not your solicitor."
Which is
I
how
just,
you raise
I
an
was so
adult.
glad my father didn't speak to me like that.
But that is how you raise an adult. Whereas parenting now is like, we are their bodyguards and their solicitors. We organize everything, and we're not raising adults, and it does trouble me. But the thing I think I most wanted to write there was the thing that I found very confusing about parenthood is that when you start a family, you almost break up a family because of this. I've called it gender segregation. The men head off one way down one tunnel. It's like, when you enter America and it's like US passport holders go this way, the men go down the US passport holders channel, and the women, in this is, my age group and older, go down that everyone else channel, and it breaks up a family. So I wanted to write about what a family is, which is a unit with, well, sorry, a family is whatever the families define themselves. But I wanted to write about how nice it can be, if there's freedom for both parents to be involved in the kids' lives, as opposed to this way now, which capitalism and patriarchy has defined as, you're going down that channel, and the usually female end of it is going down this one. So, and the model where there's both parents are involved is much happier and easier, because everyone feels better. No one's lonely anymore. And so, the other part of writing that friend character was to go, Soldier gets to be herself again. And she can reset and feel human, because there's a lifeline to who she used to be. And she doesn't take the lifeline in the end, but she benefits from it.
The second love affair, the marriage.
Yes.
The deal was made, and I think the reader knows this. Look, I'm going to work because we need money, and I'm going to be the one who's going to be the sort of breadwinner, make the money, and you're going to look after the baby. And that seems a reasonable relationship. And what your novel does is what novels should do, which is take something that seems reasonable in life and show us its texture, move inside its world. And the great thing is, I think, that the father, the husband, it's not as though he comes home drunk.
No.
And all those cliches, he doesn't do that. He isn't out with his friends boozing in some terrible bar. He's just at work, and work becomes a weapon. He weaponizes work and he seems not to even know he's doing this. There's a terrible moment. There's a moment where you say, please, and this is what happens in novels, where the reader goes, do not say what you're going to say. He's in bed saying, I have important work in the morning. Could you get the child? Please don't speak. Just so you're totally involved, I suppose, in the politics of the marriage. And I think what you've done is you've made the politics of the marriage subtle enough that you can actually see, no, he mightn't say it. There's a moment where he might not do this. It's not as though he's always ready to do his worst, which, happens in bad novels. He's always ready to try and muddle through his own way. It's just not good enough. It's just not, like, sometimes you just go, so it's a comedy at times. It's a comedy of errors in marriage, where he thinks he's doing, and the driving episode, anyone who's ever been with anyone who drives, and you're sitting beside them, and he's always a guy, I'm sorry to say, I'm letting the side down, and he just won't stop with his driving business. It's a beautiful, beautiful passage where he has to start to have a row with an SUV that he doesn't even, has done nothing to him. And he moves into the side lane to get ahead of it. And you go, please don't do any more of this.
It's a Soldier does work, or try to, because actually, certainly the society we're in, there has to be two incomes to keep the show on the road. So she does work, but she is, and this is my experience of a lot of mothers, is she's paid less, therefore she does the lion's share of the work. I was raised in, I just had a sister. I was very new to the world of driving men who have steering wheels and think this controls the planet. And I just find it so comical, So I have given the husband character all those negative, all those many negative traits that I have witnessed. And then, there's other things. I remember I used to live in this apartment, and I could hear the woman downstairs had two kids, very close together in age, and at bath time every night, one would be in the bath and the other would just scream and scream and scream and scream. But what can you do? You can't bathe them both at the same time. And this would happen every night this would happen 7 o'clock every single night. And in summer, you'd hear everyone slamming their windows shut because of the screaming babies. And one day I was out walking, and I walked past the pub, and there's her husband. So he was sitting outside in the sun having a pint, waiting till 8 o'clock, which is when the kids were gone. And
you mean gone to sleep?
Yeah, the kids were going to be, the bathing started at 7, the screaming went on till 8 when they fell asleep. by which time this lad would show up. And I never said it to her. He's sitting in the pub looking at his watch, waiting till it's safe to come home, going, oh, another long day at the office, darling. So it was one of the strategies that I saw being employed by men to say, look how hard I'm working. This is not all men, but it's some men.
It was a really wonderful experience reading this book, and thank you very much for writing it.
Thank you. And thank you